Okay, it is 4:01 p.m. on October 15th,
I would love to have as many copies as possible.
and I'm going to call to order this meeting of the City Ethics Board.
She's also wonderful. Are we starting? I'm sorry.
Yes, just called it to order.
Okay, thank you.
The first item on the agenda, and we're going to jump around on the agenda today a little bit. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Does anyone have any corrections or additions? Seeing none, Ms. McNeil moves the approval of the minutes. Mr. Payne seconds that. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Minutes are approved. I want to take one moment to talk about the last couple of weeks. We all know the city is considering its revisions to the current ethics code for the city. They are looking at a number of issues, including our recommendations. If you've had a chance to watch the last City Commission meeting, that's great. If you haven't, you might want to or not. We're going to do a very quick summary of just the factual items. I would tell you, I did go. I was invited by the city manager in writing, went, was asked if I had any comments. I said no, then was asked a number of questions by the mayor and each of the city commissioners. I am here to tell you they were all very fair questions to ask about the operation of the board and the board's recommendations. And again, we'll talk in a little bit more detail about some of that stuff, but I just want to go on record that there is some people seem to think that we ought to make this into a battle or a dialogue between the city commission and the board, and I don't care personally who has ideas, who gets credited with ideas. The bottom line is that neither the commission nor the board is a winner or a loser in this. It is only the citizens of Tallahassee who win or lose as a result of what ultimately gets accomplished. So we are here, and as a board, I did write a letter to the city attorney and say if there is anything that you would like, any issue on which you would like board input, if you will tell me, I will make sure it gets put on the board agenda. And as a board, we will give you input because, as I said in the city commission meeting, I, as one of 7 votes on this board, cannot tell you what the board thinks and would not attempt to crawl into 6 other people's heads. So, that little point of personal privilege. The next item on the agenda is the ethics officer report. The first item is the monthly summary. Ms. Meadows-Keefe, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you indicated, the first item on my report is the report of activities. I'm not going to go through each and every item. I did have the opportunity to attend the commission meeting, as I always do, but this time in the company of Chair Herring. And we did enjoy the discussion with the commission and hope that it was edifying, not only to members of the commission, but also to the public. So there was that. And again, additional training opportunities, educational opportunities that I had. And we were actually on 2 pages this month. You will see that I've attended several community events involving race relations and implicit bias. So that pretty much concludes my written report. I'm happy to answer any board member questions.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, item 2, or item 3B, I guess, on our agenda is the calls that came into the hotline.
Yes, Mr. Chair. And you will see both of those. I may not discuss each of them in detail. You can see what each of those matters involves. Both were internal and related to human resources, and we will track those until it's resolved. There's really not a role for the board because none of the people named are currently covered by the city ethics ordinance. So I simply followed our bylaws and referred to the appropriate individual.
Okay, so we have two items. The first relates to reporting information to a supervisor, and the other one relates to timekeeping. The recommendation from the ethics officer is to keep these open and track them, but that the board would take no action unless something happened in the future. Does any board member have a problem with those two recommendations on those two items? Seeing none, we will track those over time, but we will not treat them as board issues coming from the hotline. I want to jump at this point to item 6 for audit process, if I may. Mr. Sutton, who is the city auditor, has volunteered to work for us briefly and make some recommendations to us as we near the end of our 5th year of operation. He has some recommendations, and we've talked for the last couple of months about getting an audit done, and I think he has some recommendations or options for us that we can hopefully make a decision on fairly quickly. So, Mr. Sutton, you are recognized, and thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Based on the last commission meeting, I was asked to provide some information regarding potential audit procedures that could be conducted. So what I did was I went back to the agreed-upon procedures that the city engaged the external audit firm for both the city commission and the city auditor's office. And I've provided an exact copy of what was provided or what those procedures were. And I believe I also provided a copy of the purchase order to show the cost of those procedures. And I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
I don't know that I got the purchase order.
I don't think I see a purchase order here.
So let's talk about the procedures. I have a list that's numbered 1 through 9 that would get the statutes and the ordinances, determine whether the expenditures were made in compliance with the statutes and the ordinances and city policies, look at the city's employment records for the employment of the board staff who we treat as city employees for purposes other than hiring and firing primarily. Look at the pay periods to look at compensation and salary adjustments. Look at disbursement transactions, which would include P-card and other transactions, and randomly select a list of those to dig into a little deeper. And there's a fair amount of detail on that. And that would involve, number 6, is the P-cards assigned to the ethics office. Obtain a list of journal entries. Now, this is bookkeeping or accounting journal entries.
Yes, sir.
Relating to the ethics office. Obtain the final budget for the ethics office for fiscal years ended September 30 for specified years. And I think in our cases it would be for the prior 4 completed fiscal years. So we would not be, the way this would be done, it would not be this year. Now, these are city fiscal years. So
It would be up to the board's discretion as to whatever. I just, previously it was included based on the city's fiscal year, which ends September 30th.
So if we did the city fiscal year, October 1 to September 30th, we would have that partial year, the eight or so months of that first partial year, which we can include or exclude, but then we would be current on this audit up through September 30 of this year, which would be my preference. If we're going to lose any time, I'd rather lose time in the first few months of our operation than time in the last few months of our operation from the audit. And then item 9 would be look at disbursements to law firms, since we have had.
In this, I did make a slight adjustment. The procedures used for the city commission was lobbyists.
Okay.
But obviously you do not engage any lobbyists that I'm aware of. And so I adjusted that myself to say law firms, since I knew you do retain law firms.
Okay, so we've had 3 board attorneys, and then we have one of our prior board attorneys we used briefly, and then and then Phil Claypool, you all remember, helped us with our policies and procedures, although he was never a board attorney, but he was one of our finalists and has a tremendous degree of background. So there'd be 5 attorneys that would, 4 attorneys, I guess, who would make that list of folks who we have compensated for assistance for the board. Do you remember about what the cost of this would be, assuming that we reached back for 4 full county fiscal years?
For the full commission and city auditor's office, all included, was approximately $27,000.
So just for us, since
It was probably each of the commissioners was handled as an independent office because they don't oversee each other. Each one was handled independently in the city auditor's office. So splitting that 5-6 ways, I would say 20 to 25% of the 27,000. Because there's a certain amount of administrative overhead that goes into an audit overall.
it's built in no matter the size.
Right.
Okay, so we think we're talking $6,000-ish?
That would be a reasonable estimate, but it would be up to the firm.
Okay, and what would happen if we did 2 years instead of 4 years? That wouldn't cut it in half, but it might cut $1,000 or $2,000 off of that?
I wouldn't want to guess. That would be between the board and the firm.
If we decide to move forward, can we get you to talk to the firm about what the cost would be?
I can put you in contact, or I can put
Okay.
your ethics officer in contact with the firm.
That would be fine. So what's the pleasure of the members?
One thing, sir, there is no requirement that you use the same firm. You are an independent board, and you can select and choose to go with any CPA firm that you so choose.
Right. That would put us in a selection process. Actually, that's something the board members and some people in the audience may have an opinion on. The city obviously selected this firm. And we are allowed, I believe, legally, we can piggyback on this.
I would have to check with the city attorney's office.
I think that's true. We would double check that. But let's assume for the moment that we can piggyback on it, so we avoid the months involved in going through our selection process, which is not probably the best part of our skill set. So in terms of what's covered here, what are the board members' thoughts in terms of what's covered and in terms of how we can go 4 years and 9 months? We could do the last 4 full years. We could do the last 2 full years. And I'd also, if anybody in the audience has any comments or thoughts, I'd love to hear those. But what are the board members' thoughts?
My recommendation is a full 4 years and 9 months, the full time we've been around,
I agree.
full audit.
I agree.
And not, I'm sorry.
No, you go.
In the interest of moving forward as quickly as possible, I wouldn't want to go through an additional procurement process. It would be best to tag on, if it is possible and legal and all.
Okay. If you think about it, if we did 4 years and it worked out to be $6,000 averaged over the 4 years, that's $1,500 a year. This is something, obviously, it will not be it may be a recurring expenditure, but we wouldn't do it again for some time in the future. Hopefully, any problems that would be identified, we would fix quickly, and then moving forward, we should be pure for some point in time. Ms. Barr, thoughts, or are you comfortable with where we're headed?
Yes, I'm comfortable. And
Yeah, I will, but
Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask a question if anyone in the audience would like to comment. Is there any concern from the public having the audit firm be the same firm that conducts the city audit? Hearing no, then we're good.
well, you can tell when people don't have rocks in their head because they shake and there's no news.
Just wanted to confirm that.
Okay, so
And I just want to say that we
Please.
did budget for this, so it's in our 19
Oh.
numbers.
well,
already.
good.
Yeah.
Good to know. So I think what we're talking about then is the city auditor will give information to the ethics officer, and the ethics officer and the board attorney can figure out how to move forward in terms of contacting the audit firm. We would go with the proposal that is here in front of us, and the audit would be for the last 4 completed county fiscal years beginning October 1 and ending September 30th. So the 4-year period ending September 30, 2019. And looking back then for 48 months. So the audit would not include the first, whatever that is, about 7 or so months of the board's existence. But anything that we did then has probably been repeated 4 or 5 times at least since. So I believe that would be nearly a full audit of everything we've ever done. If that sounds right.
You said county fiscal year, but you meant city.
Well, city and county,
Okay.
local government fiscal year.
Got it.
And I'll ask the auditor, does that sound like from an audit perspective, does that sound like a reasonable approach?
I don't see anything that would be egregious about doing that.
Okay. Now, when an independent unit like us does the audit, would your office have any role in reviewing that?
No, sir.
No. Okay. So we would be working, again, piggybacking on the city's contract with that audit firm, but it would be essentially an independent audit in a silo right next to the city's audit.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think.
And I'm not sure I would call this an audit. It would be more agreed upon procedures, that you're agreeing on procedures for them to perform.
Okay.
That in layman's terms, it would be an audit. But when you get into accounting terms, CPA, public accounting terms, it's very specific.
Okay. So we will ultimately, when we make the agreement, we will see different language. But basically an audit firm that will be reviewing the board, its legal authority, how it has done things within its legal authority with a focus, but not solely related to the financial aspects. So they'd be looking at the statutes and the ordinances and such.
They would be identifying, but I do not believe there's anything for an evaluation
Okay.
within here. It's just making sure that they have all the records they need to compare against when they do their financial type.
Okay. So this is
procedure.
then a financial review is what we'll be buying.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think finally I understand. Probably everybody else was there 5 minutes ago. But
Mr. Sutton has one more thing, too.
Mr. Sutton has one more thing.
Yes, just while he's standing here, if that's okay.
Well, I want to close this.
Oh, sorry.
So, that said, given that description, Ms. McNeil moves that we proceed, as was just described, with getting a financial, I'll say, review of the board by the audit firm selected by the city, with the caveat that we will talk to the city attorney to make sure that there are no legal issues with us piggybacking on that contract, and also with the caveat that if it comes in substantially different from the $6,000, if it's $7,000, I think we'd all be okay. If it's $15,000, I think we'd want to come back to the board. If it comes in close to that, then it would proceed. Did I capture your thought?
You did. Perfect.
And Mr. Payne is going to second this. Mr. Payne is nodding. He seconds. Okay, so all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And we will move forward. Now, we will have at the next board meeting an update. If we can get started on this, I don't know that it can start that quickly, but we may have had some progress in actual review terms, or we may have still be, finalizing with the audit firm. Of course, we'll be on their schedule and what resources they have to devote. So another question for the city auditor, what kind of time frame would you estimate we might expect?
I believe it took them 3 to 4 months to complete the work before.
Okay,
But of course, that depends on their staffing availability.
Okay, so if we approach them fairly soon, and this works as smoothly as we all hope it will in terms of getting the agreement, we should have a final product then early in the 2020 calendar year. would be a reasonable expectation?
It would be a negotiation with the firm.
Okay, okay. I'm not trying to pin you down. I'm just trying to lay out some parameters so somebody doesn't come to us in December and say, how come you don't have the results? Well, we don't expect them that quickly, so we have reasonable expectations.
Who is the firm?
Moore Stevens Lovelace.
They're local, right?
They have a local office.
Okay.
They're statewide, maybe even regional. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
But they have a local office.
Again, thank you, Mr. Sutton. This is great advice. I like the fact that somebody outside the board, per se, was able to put something together for us, and because none of us are auditors, and I'm sure anything certainly that I would have written would have looked like gibberish to a real auditor. So I did take the vote on that, didn't I? Yes. So that issue is going to move forward. At the next board meeting, we will have an update on exactly where we are. Now, I'm told you have something else for us?
I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Well, we're going to queue up that other thing that you and I talked about. Of course, he's going, what? But on the city's audit plan for this year,
For 19,
yes,
for fiscal year 19.
yes, you have an audit of,
Of the cities, by standard, periodically, the city auditor's office, to comply with our auditing standards, we are required to do a periodic assessment of the ethical environment of the city, and we have begun that audit.
that was just for your all's information.
Okay.
And the last time one was done was...
Last time was done in 2009,
Okay, so
so that was
hopefully,
before the existence of the ethics board.
Okay. And that, when you have a public draft, can we invite you back to chat with us?
I will provide it to you, yes, sir.
Outstanding. Well, again, I would probably want to invite you back just so we have a chance to discuss things, because there may be things that we want to do a little deeper dive, or things that you identify where maybe we would take the next step. I don't know till we see it, but you have been very kind with your time, and we do appreciate it.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So that was item 6 on our agenda. It was just something I wanted to make sure that we got done, and done fairly early. I'd like to go next to item 5. You have in front of you a set of the candidates or the applications that we've gotten for the ethics officer. Ms. Meadows-Keefe, is this all of the applications that have been received to date?
Mr. Chair, you are referring to the stack of documents each board member was given,
Yes.
correct? Okay, because I don't have those in my notebook. Are those all of the applications received to date through TalGov? There are 25 there in front of you. I am getting them in batches from the city. So is this an all-inclusive list? I believe no. So as I'm getting them, I am forwarding them to you all. But I had collected up to that many, and I'd asked for them, and it took a few days for the city to forward.
Okay, so this is a subset of what we've gotten through TalGov, and I want to make sure we will get every board member will get a copy of every application that comes in from any source, correct?
Well, since this is a city employee, all of the applications need to come in through TalGov. There were some people that applied through the Indeed website. Indeed was not the appropriate channel for this advertisement because they won't let you refer to the city website. So I actually went back to each Indeed applicant and wrote to them and thanked them and said, to be considered, you need to apply through TalGov. So I think I have a few I haven't contacted yet, but we have been reaching back to them.
Okay, so every application that comes in through TalGov, every board member will get a copy of every application. And any application that we get through another source, you will contact the person and tell them they need to do it formally through TalGov. correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Can you tell us roughly when notices were about the vacancy were posted and where they have been posted to date, please?
Okay. The notice went live on TalGov on, I'm going to be guessing, but it was in September. I want to say it's September 13th or 16th. So it will, by the time the ad closes on October 25th, it will have been present on TalGov for over a month. Likewise, there was a listing, again, on Indeed. I soon determined that Indeed allows people to kind of just interview or apply for jobs, and I could see the applicants were not the kind of applicant we wanted, so I asked Indeed to remove our account. So far, that hasn't been done. So I have, again, reached back to them. There are several of those. There's also
when did the Indeed ad go up?
The Indeed ad went up in September. There has been an ad run in the Tallahassee Democrat. It appeared in the Sunday edition of the newspaper on Sunday. It will appear again next Sunday. It is also listed on Career Builder. So part of what you get with the Democrat package is Career Builder, which does have an extensive reach. I think nationally there had been interest in getting national exposure, so you get it through that.
So the Career Builder would have gone up by this last Sunday? I mean, is that?
Yes. And Mr. Chair, as I communicated to you, I had initially purchased a package with the newspaper. I won't say it out loud, the name of it. I purchased a package with the newspaper, didn't see the ad, and called and realized I hadn't purchased the exactly right ad package that I needed. So the nice person there corrected me, refunded me the money that I'd already spent, and then charged me the appropriate amount. So.
Okay. So the Career Builder ad would be up for slightly less than 2 weeks before the closing date, and nothing in the Florida Bar News, right?
No.
Okay, so my question to the board members, TalGov and Indeed in September, Democrat Career Builder in mid-October, closing date of October 25. Are we comfortable with that closing date?
We've gotten approximately, in front of you, there should be about 25 applicants in a cursory manner. I've looked at those. They seem like they are, just generally speaking, good applicants, qualified applicants. So I would project that by the closing date, I would assume you would have 50 or so applications.
Mr. Chair, I'm comfortable with the closing date. I agree with the ethics officer. And if you don't mind, there's some noise that's coming from that far right corner. I don't know what's going on, but it's a little disruptive. Thank you. Appreciate if you turn it off. Thank you so much.
Okay. We have talked in the past about holding a non-regular monthly meeting once we get the applications in. So let's assume that we're going to have by the 25th, 10 days from now, 50 or more applications, some of which you may get literally on the last day or even after a day or two after the 25th, giving all the board members a chance to review those. Would you want to have a meeting between this one and our regularly scheduled November meeting in order to solely to discuss and narrow the applications down to a reasonable number?
That's fine.
I'm seeing 4 heads nodding up and down, 5 heads. Okay.
Yeah.
So if the ethics officer will put on her to-do list contacting each of the board members to find a date probably in early November. That would give us at least a week to review a couple hundred pages of applications. And we will come in with the goal of narrowing the list to a manageable number, whatever the board determines that would be. It could be 3, it could be 10, but something, and then we would follow up. We can make a decision at that board meeting, but we would follow up, I assume, with asking them to come in and do interviews, or if somebody's truly long distance, we, in the board, thinks they're a great candidate, I guess we could do a telephone interview, but we would make that decision at the next meeting based on who's local and who's not. Does that sound like a procedure that works for everybody?
Yes.
Okay. I don't think we need a vote. That's just, we've got agreement on where we are. Ms. Meadows-Keefe.
Okay, related to that, this isn't an application for the ethics officer position. We are going to be having a vacancy on this board. At the conclusion of 2019, Ms. McNeil is actually going to term off of the board. She has maxed out.
God bless you.
And she still looks beautiful.
She survived.
She survived. So Ms. McNeil is a at-large appointment, so that means that this board gets to make the decision. So I'm going to recommend to this board that the application process open for folks that would like to apply to the board, so that when January rolls around, we have someone who won't be as nice as Ms. McNeil, but will be there present in the seat. So I just wanted to make the board aware of that fact, and that you'll also be selecting a member to replace Ms. McNeil.
Okay, so we would, as we've done in the past, we would open the application process, which I think we do through the city treasurer clerk. Has to be a resident of the City of Tallahassee, just for anybody who's thinking about applying who might
A voter.
Have the bandwidth to watch this meeting. Let's do this. Let's plan to try to have our selection discussion in December, so that anybody who wants to apply would need to apply at some time before our December meeting, so we have a chance to review those. And most of the people sitting here have been through it. We'll put all the applications in front of everybody. We'll figure out we'll kind of go through and see who people's top choices are. We'll narrow it. Usually that's 5 or 6 people, and then we'll discuss those people. Obviously, we'll give anybody who's an applicant who wants to come to the meeting and speak, we'll give them time to speak, and then the board has always been able to make a decision fairly expeditiously. So with luck, we won't ever have a vacant chair. Ms. McNeil will be missed, but I'm sure we'll find somebody who has outstanding qualities to replace her.
And with the board's approval, I'll just start that process now.
Yes.
To collect applications. The other piece, I want to just announce publicly that Ms. Ruby Barr has been reappointed by the public defender, who has now made more appointments in 1 year than John Thrasher has, because Ms. Barr was actually finishing the term of Ms. Graywall, was finishing the term of Dr. Bouchon. So she gets a full 3-year term, and I've received that correspondence from Mr. Thomas with his thanks. And additionally, I have sent a letter to Dr. Robinson at FAMU.
Yes.
Okay, requesting with Mr. Smith's agreement that he'd be willing to serve again, that he'll be reappointed, and I'm just waiting for that letter.
So his term and reappointment would be the end of December, beginning of January? Is that
His term will end December 19th, or December of 2019, and he is able to serve another term.
Okay. Everybody comfortable? Everybody understand where we are on all of those issues? Be nice to have Mr. Smith back. little bit less turnover. So item 5 actually is titled Interview Questions for Candidates. Ms. Meadows-Keefe, you want to tell us your thoughts on this issue?
I do. And Mr. Herring, being the good chair example for everyone's already given me his questions. Look at him roll his eyes. Okay. What I had asked was that this board actually expeditiously needs to agree on questions to ask the ethics officer candidates. As in most government interview processes, the same set of questions is asked to all applicants, so it's fair, and everybody's kind of judged on an even playing field. And having watched the interviews for appointed officials, the same thing. They ask everyone the same set of questions. So I would like for this board to agree on about 10 questions, and each board member would get one question to ask, and then we'd let the chair do the introductory question, and then the inevitable, do you have any questions for us? And then any gaps of employment or questions that stand out to do those. The other idea I had is prior to scheduling the interview or having the person come, they would be asked to answer a written question. That way the board members would have an opportunity to look at their writing ability, and maybe it would be an ethics-related question. So a writing sample, no more than 2 pages typed. So the first thing they would get is this request to do an answer to a written question, and that would be the same for all. And then you all would agree on a standard set of questions that would be asked to all applicants. So we're not going to have another meeting between now and when you would like to, well, you're just going to be selecting people to interview, not doing the questions. So I did ask for you all to come with ideas for questions. I don't know if you all did that or not and are willing to share those at this time.
Okay, and I want to say this is the ethics officer's idea. I don't think it's locked in stone. I've talked to a lot of people about interviewing, and there is some feeling that some consistency in the interviews makes them fair. But everyone that I've spoken to also says when you have your kind of standard questions, then you should feel free to be able to ask follow-up questions that may be raised. And then in terms of a writing sample, we could either ask them just to submit a writing sample. If we say narrow it to 6 people, we could ask those 6 people to give us an existing writing sample or write something new if they want, or we could give them a kind of a test question to answer. So whatever direction the board wants to go, and I see at least one person leaning.
Well, Mr. Chair, would it be okay with you for the ethics officer to read out the questions that you have presented so that we could get a feel for the direction that you've gone in, and you've always led us well. So I'm not doing that it's the truth. So if that's okay with you, does the rest of the board, would that be helpful? That would be great. Thank you.
All right, Board Member Graham, that's fine. He didn't distinguish whether these would be written or oral questions, and he provided 2. One was, what do you see as the biggest challenge facing a municipal ethics board like ours? How would you approach and address it? And then the other question was, as an essentially solo professional staffer, I'd want to give more of a nod to Lucy, but as an essentially solo professional staffer to a volunteer board that operates solely in public meetings, what actions would you take to maximize the board's success in fulfilling its duties under the city charter?
Very good. I agree with both of those questions. I also agree that I have been involved in selection interviews that are very limited by the inability to ask any questions outside of the question that's asked of every candidate. Now, certainly am aware of the fairness question and do not in any way want to have that be an issue. But I would like there to be some flexibility for follow-up questions that come to mind while we're talking with these individuals.
Well, how about if we do this? How about if anybody who has a question or questions, send them to Ms. Meadows-Keefe. She can compile them, and when we meet at our next non-scheduled meeting to go over the applications, we can look at those questions, and that will be our standard set of questions. But then we can go beyond those depending on the answers we get, or depending on some applications may answer a question that I would think is important, and other applications, just because the information provided to us, may not. And I would want to ask about that information that I didn't see, depending on how the person fills out their application. Ms. Meadows-Keefe mentioned gaps in employment. That would be a good one. Another would be, employment with an employer, and I have no idea who that employer is or what kind of work was involved. I think those are legitimate things for us to be able to understand their training and experience. And those questions almost have to be individualized.
Would there be excuse me, may I continue? We're being so formal tonight. Would there be a time limit given to the candidates in terms of those are pretty broad, open-ended questions that you've presented. Would there be a time limit?
I think I think we need to talk about that when we figure out how many applicants we have. If we see that we narrow it to 3, then I think we can be fairly expansive. If we see that there are 10 that we really want to interview, then we're going to have to ask people to be brief, and we're going to have to be brief.
Right. Agreed.
So I think that's a next meeting decision that I agree it is a decision we need to make. Personally, I think it's important for us to spend, because this is somebody that's going to be here certainly after I'm gone, and I would hope that we would take the time to make one of the more important decisions we'll make.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just out of fairness, again, I think we need to give parameters so that one candidate doesn't feel like he or she is given more opportunity to respond than another.
Right. And I know from interviews I've done in the past, a lot of times one of the standard interview questions is, what do you want to tell us about yourself, or what haven't we asked that we should ask, those kinds of questions. And some people answer in 4 words, and other people answer in 4 volumes.
Exactly. We've been in similar situations.
Mr. Payne.
I wanted to second Ms. Graham's view about being a bit more flexible. I've participated in many, many job interviews in both the public and the private sector, and I find that the public sector process that was described as extremely limiting. But I also have a concern about the legality of it, because that was always the explanation that was given for that type of interview structure, that we had to be fair. So maybe we need an actual legal opinion on how loose we can get.
Right. So it sounds like, Mr. Reed, you just got assuming everybody else agrees, you just got a hopefully quick assignment. The other thing about our interviews, we will be doing it in a public meeting, an open public meeting. So anybody who's on the interview list, if you're number 4 of 4 people, you will have been able to sit in the audience and hear the previous 3 answers. So it would, assuming that's the way it works, we can't exclude somebody. Assuming that's the way it works, my intent would be we would do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then go back and say, number 1, do you have any follow-up comments based on, so that everybody has a chance to speak, having heard everybody else's primary presentation.
Why don't we put them in a soundproof booth? Keep them separate so that they don't hear what the others are saying.
Can they be out of the chambers?
Pardon?
You can't exclude people.
I don't think we can exclude people
Cannot do
from a
that.
public meeting.
We did that. We didn't exclude anyone. We didn't have everyone sitting in the audience when I participated in previous.
A lot of times by just appearances, what I've seen with the appointed officials that are interviewed, they're out of the room while the others are being interviewed. So one comes in to interview and the other one leaves. So generally they're not listening to each other, but there's no requirement that they do that.
John, can you see if there's any legalities that we would be violating to not have them all sitting in the audience while they're being interviewed, one after the other? Could you just see?
I can. I'll do
Okay,
it.
I appreciate that.
I
Thank
know there's an opinion there dealing with reviews of city managers, and typically they've been asked to leave the room, and I know the Attorney General's office offered opinion saying you cannot do that.
Okay.
So
must
that
have
could run
happened
somewhat
relatively
parallel, but
recently. When did that happen? Do you know?
I'll have to go back and look.
Okay, no, it doesn't matter, just curious. 'cause
I think there's
that's
some
not
stuff
how-
in the Sunshine Manual that jumps out pretty quickly on
And we
exactly
probably
this
not
point.
do it in the chamber. I mean, unless the board particularly wants to do it in the chamber, we would just do it in another room.
I remember
We don't, they don't need to have the pressure of being televised.
Right.
Yeah.
That
much fun.
would take, and we could say to them, we'll let you guys we'll let you applicants as a group decide whether you want to sit here and listen to each other or whether you would
That's fair.
like to
All
let
right.
us call you in, but it's totally, I think the law is going to be, it's totally up to them.
Okay,
So,
that
for
makes
instance,
sense.
Ms. Meadows Keefe in her last evaluation stayed in the room, and her prior evaluation, she left the room when the board did her evaluation. But that was up to her, not up to us. But we'll make sure of the law on that
Yeah,
one.
I appreciate that.
I
Thank
got you. Okay, anything else on candidates? I think we've talked about the applicants, talked about getting the application, continuing to get applications in, our review, special meeting, questions, and we will finalize kind of the process, and then we can either do it as a subset of a regular board meeting. I would hope that we could have a regular board meeting, and maybe we just schedule not much else on the agenda. Ms. Barr.
Bear.
Bear. Did I say Barr?
Sorry,
Bear.
Miss
I know.
Barr. I'm Miss Bear. Just a couple of things right here. We are concerned that a national search is not being able to be done because Ms. Meadows Keefe hasn't gotten the announcements out nationally. We have not had a national search done for this position yet, and we would like to see it happen nationally. And I know that initially when this was talked about, you guys had a deadline of October the 15th for applications to be in and discussed in November. And our first our first job announcement went out on the 13th. So we're concerned about that. Just want to bring that up to your attention. Also, something, since I've been doing a whole lot of research into other ethics commissions and ethics boards, one thing that I ran across is on ethics board members' qualifications, and I didn't know if this is the appropriate time to bring this up to you guys since you're going to be replacing Ms. McNeil, but Jacksonville actually has criteria for ethics board members, and I wanted to read those to you. An attorney, a certified public accountant with forensic audit experience, a former elected official, not one that's running again, a former judge, a higher education facility member or former faculty member with experience in ethics, a former law enforcement official with experience in investigating public corruption, a corporate official with background in human resources or ethics, a former board member of the City of Jacksonville, in case you want to know where I'm coming from, independent authority, or a former government executive with ethics experience. There's some good criteria there that might serve the board well, and I just wanted to bring them to your attention.
If you have that electronically, would you share that list with us?
Yes.
Well, whether we would adopt it or not, I don't know, but I think it certainly provides
I have a screenshot of it. I can
provides a nice
shoot it
roadmap.
via email.
Right, thank you.
One more little small. We also,
Mr. Sims.
Ms. Keefe has not acknowledged any of the minority bar associations have not been known. We would like for minorities to be recognized in that. We have some shortage off in there too. We'd like to get that done.
Ms. Meadows Keefe.
I would point out that I also did place an ad on the Kogel website, which is a national organization for ethics professionals, and that's got a national reach, and it's got a targeted national reach of people that are involved in these kinds of activities. Additionally, Career Builder is searchable nationwide. We did talk about a nationwide search. Florida legal experience is important. So, someone from out of state would be fine. Someone here locally may have more familiarity with the Sunshine Law, public records, and 112.
And when did the Kogel ad go out?
The Kogel ad was one of the first ones because that's one of the easiest ones to place. I will say that those ads are only accessible to Kogel members. So if you're a Kogel member, you get to look at the job board. So again, that's very targeted.
In terms of Mr. Sims, minority bar associations, I'm not sure.
Tallahassee Barristers is one.
Okay. No, sir, I didn't hear you say that.
We have local minority entities, bar, you have FAMU right here with the law school. You have
From the perspective of the board, how would you feel about Mr. Reed or Ms. Meadows-Keefe reaching out to one or more of those groups?
Tallahassee Barristers Association, I think, is another one, right, Ms. Barr?
Yes, I'm a member, and we're meeting actually Thursday.
So you can announce the job,
I will.
and I'll email you the advertisement.
Right. And matter of fact, there are two separate, there's another organization as well. I'll email it to both.
All right, thank you so much.
Outstanding. Mr. Sims, thank you. That was good advice, and Ms. Barr is plugged in and connected and going to hook us up.
Well, do we need to amend that deadline date? If we are, since we're just sending out things and including additional, or do we need to extend it?
I think if we extend it, we're going to have to extend it everywhere.
Okay.
So that's the question. What do the board members want to do on the date? Otherwise, we'll close on the 25th. Ms. Barr is talking about a meeting on the 17th, so that's 8 days before closing. Would you want
I
to?
think that's enough time, though. I do, because
Do you?
a lot of people, well, folks in our area, we keep our resumes handy.
So do I.
Yeah, they're handy. And with everything being done, through the internet, it's relatively simple and easy. So I think we'll be fine. Matter of fact, I'll send something out to the presidents tonight. Just get them a heads up so we can get the official notification. And they know to go to the City of Tallahassee's employment line.
I'll send you all they need to know.
Okay, yeah, and I'll do that. I'll do that this evening.
Okay.
Would it be legal for us to do this, to leave the published closing date at the 25th of the month, but to internally agree that we would accept any application that came in, say, till by the 30th? As opposed to going out and changing it everywhere if something got... Because we could also have a situation where somebody puts it in the mail on the 25th, which I guess counts, but we didn't receive it till a few days later. Well, I guess you can't put it in the mail and do it on the city website, can you?
No, you got to apply to the city website.
Can I ask how many, if any, non-local applicants we've had so far?
Most of them are local. I haven't done a hard target read through all of them, but most of them seem to be from here.
I saw one from Georgia.
Yeah,
It's local.
I know, just teasing.
we're almost there.
Trying to lighten the mood around here. It's so serious tonight.
Okay, so we're going to stick to October 25th? Sounds like?
I think so. If
Sounds
we don't,
good.
we have to push everything.
And if we see flaws when we get to our next meeting, we'll do what we need to do to correct them. But I think reaching out to a couple of more groups here is a great idea. I think that finishes item 5. What I would like to do is, again, in my jumping around here, I gave, should have a copy.
Oh, your stuff, you did?
Yeah.
You should have a handout.
Looks like this, right?
Yeah, do you have a spare? I don't seem to have it.
This?
Yes.
This?
Yeah, Can I borrow this one? You have a spreadsheet that's a side-by-side. We do not know what the city's ethics code proposals will be. We know that they're having a meeting between this meeting of our board and the next meeting of our board. I do not know if they will take action. So simply to update you on where we are, what I did, I already had a spreadsheet built of our recommendations. So in the columns on the left-hand side, it's 2 pages long. On the left-hand side, you will see our recommendations for the ethics ordinance and then our recommendations for city policy development. On the right-hand side, the only thing that we have seen in writing so far is the mayor's op-ed where he said the things that he would like to use to, the items he would do to expand the current ethics code. So you can see in terms of the ethics code itself, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 items that we had recommended. He picks up 5 of those 8. Now, in terms of the general subject, and again, we don't have language, and I don't know what else will come from the other city commissioners and staff, so there could well be 15 by the time it's all done. This is simply an update based on what we have. Probably the biggest difference, you'll see that our recommendation, and if you look at the third column, was very broad. All of ours would either apply to all city officials and all city employees, or to all city officials, or to all city officials and any city employee or board or commission member, whether it's volunteer or not, who submits a Form 1 financial disclosure. So ours captured a lot of people. On the second page, you will see the mayor had 2 items to be that he is proposing to include in the ethics code that we did not have in our recommendations. One relates to a detailed financial disclosure, and the other relates to disclosure of contributions from city vendors. And then the rest of that page are items on policy development and the other issues that the mayor had recommended that aren't related to ethics codes that could be violated or to punishments. There's no lineup between those. Are just separate lists. They just happen to be next to each other, so I didn't push on to a third page. But you can see the rest of what we had in a very summary fashion. Remember, our report and recommendations were 30 or 40 pages long. Yes. So there were a lot of words, and getting us down to half a page was interesting. And then everything else that the mayor had in his op-ed. So I think I've tried to include everything here, so you can see kind of where we are. So we're getting I think a good match in terms of 2 parties, both of whom want to do something significant. So any questions on that? One of the issues that's come up is this issue of an inspector general, and I've read at least one news article that said the inspector general could be under the ethics board. So what I've done on the next page is given you from the Florida statutes what agency inspectors general do. Now, I don't know what a city inspector general would do. Obviously, the city would have to write that job description. But you can see, in general, an agency inspector general promotes accountability, integrity, and efficiency. They develop performance measures and standards for the various programs. They address reliability and validity of information that the agency develops. They review everything the agency does to improve program performance. They direct, supervise, and coordinate audits and investigations and management reviews. They coordinate other activities for the state agency to promote economy and efficiency. They advise the agency head and the governor and the chief inspector general on fraud, abuse, and deficiencies. They review all of the agency rules relating to programs and operations and the impact of those rules. They ensure an appropriate balance between audit, investigative, and other accountability activities, and they comply with general principles and standards for offices of inspector general. So they are, an inspector general is generally far, far, far broader than what we do by several orders of magnitude. So just so we understand, when we talk about inspectors general, that's not something that where we would have an additional position if you do what the general understanding of inspector general is. I have found several local jurisdictions that have both an ethics board and an inspector general, and what they typically say in their ordinance is that if the inspector general sees an ethics issue, they'll refer it to the ethics board. If the ethics board gets one of our hotline calls, just like we would refer something to HR, we would refer it to the inspector general if it was something that fell in their bailiwick. So they work side by side, but they're different critters. There was also a proposal for a whistleblower. Again, we've talked a lot about whistleblower in the past, so the next 2 pages are the highlights from the state law on whistleblowers, legislative intent, the actions that are prohibited once a whistleblower has been identified, and who information is disclosed to, again, just to refresh you on whistleblowers. And then the remaining pages are the Form 6 detailed financial disclosure that is currently required of constitutional officers, which would be the governor and cabinet, the legislature, and the constitutional officers, the property appraiser, tax collector, clerk, those other county constitutional officers. And by law, it includes a small group of people that are transit or road authority people. I don't remember the exact term, but those are the people currently who do a Form 6. So you might want to take a look at the Form 6 and see what it involves. Basically, you say everything you own and what it's worth. It would include your jewelry. It would include each stock, each bond, each piece of property, whether it's in the state of Florida or not. For someone who's done a Form 6 can tell us that there's some detail, and usually there's an accountant involved. So that you know what all the things that are being discussed. That's a little bit of background. Mr. Payne.
As you know, the mayor has been advocating the Form 6, and he asked you about that at the commission meeting, and I think you responded something to the effect that you expected pending legislation regarding that.
On the Form 6, here's what happened. The legislature pushed pretty hard on Form 6s. Let me see if I can find my list. In 2016, 17, and 18, there were bills in both the House and the Senate that would have added a Form 6 requirement for each elected mayor and member of the governing body of a municipality that had $10 million or more in total revenue for 3 consecutive fiscal years. So they were picking, people who have control over large amounts of money, over millions of dollars. Those bills for all 3 of those years, of course, when we started our recommendations, we were in 2018, and we'd actually seen the year before the bill passed in the House and made it over to the Senate and died. But it was still, when we were considering our blue sky list, it was still, these things were still alive. This issue of Form 6 for elected mayors and members of governing bodies got significant enough opposition that it did not pass. In 2019, there were vehicles that were similar but did not include this provision. So I do not know at this point. I can't say that we will see the legislature do it. We know that they were in the House. It was done in the PI Committee, Public Integrity and Ethics Committee, as a committee product. In the Senate, they were filed as member bills. I don't know what the future holds for the legislature requiring Form 6s. Okay. With that, I would like to go to the 1-page or 2-page list. Ms. Meadows-Keefe, I don't know which item it is. The bullet list? Yes. Is that?
The bullet list
is 3.
Is 8. I want to say it's number 8. Do you want to cue it up, or would you like?
There's number 8. This was Ms. Meadows-Keefe, put together a list of the topics that came up at the last city commission meeting, so that you can see in that discussion. And again, these were from questions that were kind of off the tops of the heads of the mayor and the commissioners. I believe at the next meeting we'll begin to see more formal proposals and maybe some language. We provided this just to give you an idea of at least what the issues that have been raised so far. And you can see there are a number of issues here that go beyond what was on my side-by-side spreadsheet of our proposal and the mayor's proposal. So if anybody had any questions on those, we could talk about any particular one.
Are we talking about this now, or are we going to do it after the break? In terms
I was going to go ahead and take item 8
Okay.
now.
Okay.
I'm jumping around on our list here.
That's good. I like that, keeping us on our toes.
Yeah, keep you on your toes.
I like
Exactly.
that. I like that a lot.
Exactly.
Mr. Chair, the issue of the Inspector General, I think, is a significant one, and one that I would like to get more input from the City Commission in terms of what their thoughts are about that. And I'd also like to hear from the public as well, in terms of, we are an independent ethics board, and therefore that independent quality that we want to preserve means that if the Inspector General is inside of the City of Tallahassee, how does that occur? But again, I am speaking, recognizing I want to gain a lot more knowledge about how this is perceived to work, and would like to hear from the public as well that may have opinions on where the Inspector General, if in fact that is created, because it would be a new position, correct?
Yes, and what we've seen in other jurisdictions is you probably need 1 or 2 auditors and 1 or 2 investigators. So you're talking about at a minimum $500,000 to $1 million a year operation, based on what we see in other jurisdictions.
And is this something that we could combine and have the Inspector General also essentially be the ethics officer? I mean, could it be one and the same? Would they have to be separate? They would.
I think you'd have to change the charter. I can tell you in at least one. I want to say it's Broward County. They have I don't remember now. It's one of the counties. The Inspector General is selected by a committee that's made up of the ethics board, the independent ethics board, the state attorney, and the public defender, and there might be 1 or 2 other players. So they don't answer to the city management.
Right.
The legislature with the auditor general, which is not an inspector general, but that's kind of independence, they get around that. I believe the House and Senate hire the auditor general, but that they hire them, that person for a term that exceeds the term of office of any of the sitting members of the legislature, and they hire off the election cycle, so that person is guaranteed that if they have audit findings that the legislature's not happy with, they're protected because their term as the auditor general goes beyond that. And I don't remember the exact statutory languages for like 8 or 12 years that you get that job. So there are ways that you can build in independence of an inspector general. But I know I don't know if it's specifically on the inspector general, but Ms. Baer, I have a card for you on item 8. Sure. And
Be on
Mr.
your
Sims,
toes
I'm going to
out
come
there.
to you
Come
next.
on. We're jumping around. No, I'm very interested in this. I appreciate you providing more information, because it does not seem like it would work as the Independent Ethics Board was set up to work, to have that Inspector General position within the City of Tallahassee. But I could be wrong, and that's
The cities of Jacksonville and Palm Beach County are the two cities that I actually did some research on. This is not what I have prepared for you, so please don't count that on my time.
I'll give you some of my time, Kathy.
Thank you. They both have inspector generals that are independent. They were selected much like the criteria that Broward County has.
Right.
I know that the city of Jacksonville, the inspector general, actually gives a report to the ethics board. I have no idea how jurisdictionally that lies, but I do know that there is a sense of independence from the city. I don't believe that they report to the city. According to what Mayor Daley was looking at, is he was looking at an inspector general that actually reports to the city auditor, which puts it reporting to the city commission down the chain. Does not offer the independence that we would like to see for a position of that importance.
Can I ask you, did the city of Jacksonville set up the independent ethics board? Did they take?
Yes, they actually did.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you have any more questions before I start with my statement?
Let me, on the Inspector General, let me finish this discussion, then I'll
Sure.
I'll come back to you. Mr. Sims, I have a card for you on item 8. Was it on the Inspector General or was it on broader issues? Okay. And Mr. Jackson, if you got something, I was seeing you chomping at the bit on this issue too. Excuse me, Dr. Jackson. Did I say Mr.? I'm sorry.
Bringing my stick
Ms.
up
Bear
here,
and Dr.
and
Jackson,
Amy
I'm going to speak.
upsized me, and she got a scooter with 4 wheels, so I feel a little insecure. I think that please don't allow me to speak for these smart people that I'm with. I think that when we are talking about our Inspector General, Ms. Graham, we're speaking
Please, Stanley.
more or less of a more stepped up of level of service of that we can really feel that our complaints have been properly investigated. I'm not, and Mr. Smith, this is just from old layman's point of view, is that, and I'm also looking not so far as the legal aspects on paper, but I'm also, Ms. McNeil, I'm looking at physical location. Everybody doesn't view City Hall friendly. So for the officer to be in here, then you ask me, where could she go? Well, you have the Renaissance Center. You have so many other city options that are community-based friendly that could be placed in there. And so those are my remarks on, look at that, they just smiling. They thought I was going to be at this.
Dr. Jackson, I'm going to add item 8 to your card.
I signed up to talk to on 4B, kind of the ethics
and I will
ordinance.
get you when we get to
we'll
it.
get to that.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Okay. The individual Inspector General, I think there's 2 things we need to look at. Number one, when I thought of an ethics officer, I wanted to, in the very beginning, 5, 6, 7 years ago, is we don't need necessarily an educator or a teacher or a trainer. All right, we haven't spent the last 8 or 9 years with the FBI dealing with educators and trainers. All right, we need an investigator. We need someone with a knowledge of criminal behavior. So I would see, and it kind of goes together, when we talk about Inspector General, we definitely don't want to have the Inspector General under the city. Okay, there's a number of things you listed, the policies or procedures, that sort of thing. I'm less concerned about that. They'll work their way through that. But I could see that we have a half-time ethics officer or a combination, the ethics officer and if you want to call it an Inspector General, but someone who'd be able to actually very familiar with the criminal process and criminal investigations, and that person, if you want to make that person completely independent, the way you've discussed, that would be fine. But as long as that would be one way that I think we would have, from the public, more bang for our dollars. And I think everyone needs a little bit of training. guess, but most of us know. A politician asked me if I could explain it to him. I said, yeah. I said, if it's not yours, don't take it. Okay, now, and he understood that, so we don't need to provide a lot of training. On the other hand, if you provide some kind of training that Form 32 needs to be signed 3 times, okay, well, no one's going to go to jail on that, and we're not overly concerned with it. So I would see a combination. I think based on the caseload of what I've been sitting and watching, I think we could cut the ethics officer's position that's currently being done. I think it's about a half-time position, and I think that we're spending over $100,000 or thereabouts. That's a significant waste of time. Thank you.
Okay, and I will come back to you when we get to the other item, Dr. Jackson. Okay, so on item 8, now we're a little outside of our normal bailiwick here because an inspector general is not ethics.
It's investigation.
There's an overlap, but they would
Right.
do, obviously, they'd be looking at all the validity of city policies and how everything works. So there's some overlap or some, we would bump up against an inspector general, just like we do with the city auditor. There have been a number of things where we've had joint interest with the city auditor. So we've probably spent more ethics time on the inspector general maybe than is ultimately necessary. But is there anything else on this list, on item 8, that any board members want to talk about or discuss? Well, Mr. Sims, let me do the board members first, and then I'll come to you.
Yeah, as far as the Inspector General, I don't think that would be something that we would need to consider. I think it's reactionary. I would rather we be more, I guess, introspective and think about what we can do as an ethics board to make the public more comfortable and more trusting in what we do and what appearance we may have or give off. I think we could tighten up ourselves internally and would not need an inspector general. I mean, to me, I thought we were thinking about a new ethics officer, starting fresh with that, and an investigator, and leaving it at that, and moving forward, and holding ourselves accountable. You know, we always look in to see what we can do better every year, and leaving it at that. An inspector general, to me, creates another round of bureaucracy. Gets a little bit too tedious, and I don't know who would control. And if it's going back to the commission or going back to city government, that person, in essence, could be looked at in time as being biased too. So if we're independent, I think we should just tighten up the controls that we have and the things that are available for us. Get us a strong investigator or a list of investigators, as we discussed, based on what the circumstances may be. And since we're moving forward with the new ethics officer, just making sure we're really tight on the criteria and the type person that we choose to hire for that position. That's all I had to say about the Inspector General.
Any other board
Mr.
members
Chair,
on item 8?
I think one of the things that is important for everyone to know, City of Tallahassee, is that we gain our authority, citizens of Tallahassee, we gain our authority through the City Commission. And until they weigh in on the ordinances that we have worked on and presented to them and decide what they wish to accept and what they wish to reject, we're at their mercy in terms of how we move forward. So I'm looking forward. I will be there. I have put it on my calendar and make sure I have no conflicts. October 28th, correct, is the workshop for the ordinances?
Yes,
Is that accurate?
So. Yes.
But one thing I do think that would be good for us to address and develop a process for is if we get a complaint that comes in through the hotline and it involves an individual that we in fact currently do have authority over, what would be, I think we could make that process a better one. That if the individual wishes to come, if that is that line item that we discuss every board meeting of the hotline calls that have come in, give him or her an opportunity to come and address the issues if he or she wishes to, if we are going to talk about it in an open board meeting, just give them that opportunity. I think that might cure some of the questions, and Julie certainly weigh in, but if that might cure some of the concerns about that hotline procedure.
We can certainly invite the person, but we would have to do that verbally, or because we've never identified anyone who's.
Yeah, and I think that's true, but I think the issue that resulted, everybody knew who we were talking about because, I mean, so I just think we need to be sensitive to those types of situations.
Yeah. Well, but part of my response is when you have jurisdiction, our total jurisdiction, depending on which portion of the current ethics code you're talking about, extends to cumulatively 17 people, the 8 people who lobby for the city and the 9 city officials. So for anything that a hotline call that we would say might apply to someone within our jurisdiction, when you have jurisdiction over so few people,
I know, that's
it's
part of
always going to stick out. Anybody's going to be able to figure out who that person is. So it's kind of a catch-22. We didn't create that jurisdiction. When we originally asked, for instance, for misuse, we said all city officials and all city employees, and we got 9 people in response. So I think we could do that. I would ask Mr. Reed, in our policies and procedures, we talk about the charter, of course, says that we have to, the board deals with the hotline. So we can't say the ethics officer can close a hotline issue without ever raising it to the board because the charter puts that responsibility on the board. We've talked about in our procedures, our administrative procedures, how the board could choose to take a hotline call, which was not a sworn complaint. The board could go into, ultimately, after some investigation had been done, could go into an executive session, not on camera, although reported by a court reporter, which with the transcript ultimately released, and go into that executive session and convert that hotline call where the board would essentially file a sworn complaint. Can you walk us a little bit through that process of how we would get, how we move from a hotline call that's not a sworn complaint but is about a serious ethics matter and convert it into something that the board can move forward on as a sworn complaint?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This is, I think the mayor's actually raised a very significant issue because I think when you're a public official, it's very hard to unring a bell. Once something gets out there, once you're cleared, well, sometimes the damage is done. And I think that's why the exceptions to the Sunshine Law do provide for confidentiality of complaints until you get through that probable cause stage. What we have here is we have a hotline where it comes in, it's not even a complaint, it's just an allegation. So it may be worthwhile to, I think we said the ethics officer doesn't have the authority, but possibly we could somewhat delegate power to the ethics officer to almost summarily dismiss those that are so clearly outside the jurisdiction of this board that it just be presented in the form of a consent agenda at a meeting and it not be called attention to. And if we wanted to take something that was an allegation that was made, whether it has merit or does not, could create some provision where we automatically self-initiated to a complaint for the purposes of maintaining confidentiality. So then it would then be immediately put into the pipeline where it would then go to a probable cause panel, and we would be able to maintain confidentiality that way in order to protect against those who may be faced with a meritless complaint. And that's how I would think. But I think as of now, we have a complaint, as we had in the past. It wasn't very hard to figure out who it was, even though we did everything to redact the name. And that obviously is not fair to the individual. But as far as what's public record, what's subject to sunshine, the way that, because I've been thinking about this a lot reading the newspaper articles, how do we protect that while staying in compliance with our sunshine and public records laws, which are among the most liberal in the nation? So that's a thought that I had.
Ms. Grant.
I appreciate that, John. My question would be, would that then be turning this into something even more significant when the decision had been made that we were going to close that hotline complaint? There was nothing to it. So I don't think in that, I mean, that situation, as I think why the concern is a valid one, is that this was an event, a hotline complaint that came in. I don't even know if it was a complaint. I can remember it was a complaint. But it was someone that just had an issue. You know, she just said, you know. So we don't want to elevate that to a sworn complaint status because Julie, our ethics officer, had made the decision to close it. Mm-hmm. And then she came to the board and we discussed an event that had already been closed. And then that's how I think this issue has become one that we're grappling with, is what's the right way to handle something of that nature that you're right, it could become an issue for one of the elected officials unintentionally because of the process that we follow. So is there a better process for that kind of unique situation that would avoid elevating it to something it should not become, but also not ringing a bell that cannot be unrung?
If I may. And I don't want to elevate claims that could have little to no merit or be done with malice. However, I'm trying to figure out how do we get from the intake of the phone call to the decision to dismiss for lacking merit and maintain confidentiality while staying in compliance with the Florida statute. And that's the concern that I would have. And so the thought that I had is that we convert it into almost a self-initiated by staff complaint, and this is me spitballing. I'd want to do additional research and see how it's handled elsewhere. But I do understand, I'm sympathetic to our public officials who, the vast majority are good public servants, and they don't deserve to have baseless allegations thrown at them, then have to deal with, you can't unring that bell. So I'd be more than happy to look into some possible avenues on how we could explore this and try to prevent baseless complaints becoming more than they should in the future.
Remember, if we go into an executive session, that means we are hiring a court reporter at the taxpayer's expense. We will have then a discussion where we had the particular instance we're talking about here. I believe we had 2 hotline calls, 2 different months. They were on the list. There was nothing in the description that was identifiable other than because of a very limited number of people that it could apply to. So it was identifiable by various folks. Had we gone into, had we invited people to the meeting, we would have had even more discussion than we had. Had we gone into an executive session, we would have had a court reporter, we would have had an open discussion among the 7 board members, we would have talked about names and dates and places. And when we closed it, that transcript from that executive session is made public, so you have that full discussion now. I don't know, and I would tell you, I personally would object to ever saying that the ethics officer can close a hotline call. I think that's the board's responsibility. And I also personally would object to any kind of, a consent agenda. Because I don't know how a board like ours has a consent agenda without basically having an unofficial meeting where staff goes and talks to everybody and polls them. I don't know how you get to a consent agenda in any way that doesn't look like you've violated the public meetings laws. For a board like this one, on a matter like that.
Well, I do think we need to be very careful if we have a situation like this occur again, that we don't give the impression that it's over. We need to make sure that we let the individual know that this is going to come before the board and that it will be a recommendation of closure, but the board has to vote on it, in fact, to close the item.
Okay, so then we get hotline calls. So we had a hotline call. Two of the hotline calls that we talked about tonight were both about city employees outside the ethics code. Do we want to make sure that they're advised and they have the ability to come here?
Those are the city employees?
So,
Yes.
But we don't, but they're not one of the,
They are not covered by
Right.
the ethics code. But
Right.
they are city employees, and we are going to discuss the hotline calls involving them that were referred to HR. So do we want, I'm trying to figure out where we draw lines. Do we want
well,
those people here?
if we get expanded jurisdiction, in order, to be fair, I think this is something we're going to need to discuss further.
But let's say people outside our jurisdiction, outside our ethics jurisdiction.
Currently, outside of our jurisdiction.
Well, and I don't know what we're going to.
No, I agree. I agree, but that's why this is such an unusual situation, because we don't have jurisdiction over many.
Right.
So this was an unusual situation,
But-
at least in my lengthy time here on the board. How long has it been?
a year? Almost.
So let me see, is what you're saying, if we get a hotline call and it is about someone who would fall within our jurisdiction, and the call, so this is going to be in the judgment, I guess, of the ethics officer, the call is about something that sort of might be ethics, maybe, that already the ethics officer is going to talk to that person to get background information. That's going to occur. The hotline call is going to get published like it has every month for 5 years. But that we need to advise that person that hotline call will be on a particular agenda. Is that, so it would be limited to those people who could conceivably fall within the ethics jurisdiction of the board and not people who wouldn't? Is that where you're headed?
Well, if we don't have jurisdiction over them, then we close it based on that, don't we? Because we don't have jurisdiction to act on it?
Well, but the two tonight were people who did, there's no ethics, or we don't think there's an ethics issue there because they're not people who are within our jurisdiction, but they were referred off to HR. So whether we close it or not, those two people were before this, I don't know who I have no idea who they are.
Right, and
But
that's the difference, is that they have some anonymity because, but why don't we, I think this would be a very good topic to discuss on October 28th.
Okay, so,
I think
for the commission.
just to discuss in a broader way, I mean, those most impacted by this, what are their thoughts?
Well, but it's something we need to decide because remember, the charter says that the independent ethics boards the independent ethics board will write its due policy procedures. The city doesn't do that under the charter.
And that's why I brought this up as a point of order about what we want to do with this policy. Right. But I do think that the question, it's fair to ask to those most impacted by this, explaining the limitations that we work under and how this has worked for the last 5 years, because I think that's the issue. There hasn't been an understanding by those that this impacts of how this actually works and how it might not be ultimately in the best interest to do what the concerns that were raised to follow through with putting new rules and procedures in place.
Yeah, I would personally would not want to do anything that calls even more attention to someone who we got a hotline call on and we go, no, it's just not an ethics issue. I mean, at that point, it ought to be dropped. We ought not to do more process. But how about if we do this? How about if we ask Mr. Reed to go back and ponder this a bit more, specifically how we handle hotline calls that raise issues about people who may be within the city ethics code and issues that may be within the city ethics code, and how we make sure that we handle them in the most appropriate way possible, and then we would come back with recommendations to, if there are any, to amend our adopted due process procedures.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Does that work for everybody?
We-
And with a very narrow, we're not looking at all our due process procedures, just this one very specific issue.
Because of the impact it could potentially.
Yeah, and I agree. My view is always that we were having the lowest impact we could have. If there's a way to have a lower impact without delegating it to the ethics officer. Personally, I I think the board ought to do what the board ought to do. So, Mr. Reed, is that clear? And do I have nods from everybody to assign that to Mr. Reed? Okay. Okay, anything else on item 8? Mr. Sims, I think I was due to call on you next.
There's an old R&B singer. He sung a song called "Practice What You Preach," old Barry White. And then in the church, Miss McNeil, during revival time, they used to sing this old song saying, "I don't want my running to be in vain." Mr. Richard Herring, I want to tell you that your stand at that commission meeting was so impressive. I was sitting home nursing Prince. He had lost 17 teeth, and so he was not feeling the best. And I watched you, and my phone was just laudering up. And then I had one of my white conservative friends to text me this message. It's not what you stand for, it's how you stand. Even white people gets a hard time doing the right thing. Take note, Stan. What I'm trying to say tonight is this. Mr. Payne, the system worked. What 68 voters voted for this independent ethics office to take a deeper look at city officials being very cognizant about their actions, that's what happened. Someone saw something sitting in their living room, I don't know if it was on Lake Bradford Road or Ox Bottom, and said, "Hey, is this ethical? I'm not a lawyer, I'm a plumber. Is this ethical?" And guess what? My utility bill pays taxes so I can find out, is this ethical or not? Because I'm finna call Julie and say, "Julie, I'm paying you over $100,000 a year. I want to know if this is ethical." And Julie's job is not to do privilege to other people. When the cop pulls me over the side of the road, they don't stop and say, "Let me check with your parents and see, would this be proper for us to arrest you right here?" They believe in the system. When they see me and y'all pass by the road and them blue lights are flashing, you saying, "Oh, he's going to jail. We just pray he get it right." Because that is the system. Mr. Bill Holloman, who was on this here commission, he said, "One thing I love about us is that even though we're powerless, when people call, it sheds a light. So now, when you get ready to buy a car, you're going to watch to make sure ain't nobody around with no doggone cameras. You're going to make sure when you take those selfies with the right people. Why? Because you're going to be cognizant of the people you represent. And that's what we elected you for. And we ain't trying to sugarcoat it or soften it for anyone. That's when this board worked. And so I'm going to say this. Mr. Herring, if you ordered the code red, because that's how I felt like he treated you. I was yelling in my living room, "Tell him, damn it, tell him you ordered the code red. Because that's your job." And to these board members, we have an $800 million budget. And for someone to tell you to equate the meat in your living room is outright it's disgusting. It lowered your standards. He don't meet in nobody else's living room. Have you ever been up to his office? I've been up there. It's really nice. Look at my utility bill. It don't say you got the meeting on. No, we don't want you in no lit. We want you up here. And so those policies, this is important to country people like me. Everybody don't get treated the same. And here now we finna sanction it. No, a complaint is a complaint. Whether it's on my good friend Gwen or if it's on, what's his name? Who is that president? I can't forget it. I remember if we got one. The way the country is running, you don't think we have one. But a complaint should not be sugar-coated and delicately handled. It should be vetted. STR, do they run any sensitive background when they talking about Mayor Gillum? As Tallahassee Democrat, do they do it? Do they handle it sensitive when they writing about us? No, they don't. They write it. So let the mayor, he a big boy. Let him roll with the punches. He drives a Honda, not a Craft.
I believe I have just been to the Church of Sims.
All you gotta say is,
I believe we are done with item 8.
You have someone wait.
Oh.
Someone there.
Dr. Jackson on item 8. Yes, sir. And Ms. Baer, I promised I'd come back to you. We are not done with item 8. I am wrong again.
That's okay. I was waiting my
Dr.
turn.
Jackson, you're recognized.
I gave everyone a sheet of paper here.
Yes, sir.
And I
We
want
have
to
that.
tell you, I was thrilled. I was excited. After 8 or 9 years, I put this letter together because at that same meeting, there seemed to be people wanting to say there was conflict. And I sat there and I listened to it. I didn't see any conflict.
No, sir. That was
I
a great
had
meeting.
conflict dealing with John Marks. I've had conflict with Gillum. I've had conflict with Scott Maddox. That's conflict. Okay? What happened there, and I sat there, and I know the difference, we had a mayor who had some suggestions on how to make the ethics board stronger. I said, hallelujah. Then we had the chairman do a great job, and this board saying we've got a list of things to make this ethics policy stronger. And so I went ahead and just made a list and passed it out to you. If we can include all these things, and I think we can, I don't think there's anyone on the city commission that's going to say we don't want to include these, then our ethics policy will be so much stronger than the way it was when we first began. And keep in mind, when we began, we had a city commission that was totally opposed to this, and then they asked Lou Shelley to write this up, to make it as ineffective as possible, and that's where we started. And it was Lou Shelley that hired our current ethics officer, which was also part of the problem from the very beginning. So I'm going to go on record being as positive as I possibly can. We're making significant improvements. Now, I heard two other things real quick. Form 6. We have to have Form 6. If we had Form 6, I would have learned about some of the dealings of John Marks and Scott Maddox years ago. But when you're a private citizen, they don't want to share that information. Now, if you want to sit on this board and you either can't afford to or don't want to reveal to the public what you own and how you get paid, then resign. That's simple. Secondly, someone mentioned Sean Pittman's name as a law firm. Now, the problem, let's also make sure, because I jumped when I heard that, we don't need anyone who has contracts with the city sitting on an ethics board, okay? And I assume that was kind of understood and we wouldn't have to mention that. But I want to make sure that we mention that. And the other thing I want to point out is we should be focused right now on implementing these items. And also, I forgot to say, I've included 3 or 4 on the back: nepotism, dealing with managers, campaign managers, public relations folks, city vendors, and also I think we ought to restructure the city. And I understand this is not for tonight, but if we actually had 6 single-member districts and a mayor, it would make it easier for one person to get elected, which means you wouldn't have to hire lobbyists to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars. Someone in this area could represent their group. And if you get the money out of the politics, reduce it significantly, then we're going to have a lot less corruption. That's probably the most important thing that this board could look at and discuss with the city. And I think the city commissioners I've talked with are also looking at that as well. Finally, we need to be focused on this. unfortunately, we still have the issue of our ethics officer. Now, why? I've been up here for about a year, 8-10 months, talking about we need to remove the ethics officer. Nothing personal, but she made decisions which has created doubt, which has been a negative impact on the ethics board. We had a number of people got together to have a press conference, and we have members of this board that kind of look the other way. Now, I've had 3 people who've called me who have applied for positions to be the ethics officer. And when they get a phone call from our current ethics commissioner, ethics officer, they're kind of shocked. What is she doing? Is she going to be making the decision, given her position? All right, they see that we've gone on and on and on, month after month after month. That's the focus, and it shouldn't be. She needs to be removed. She should have been removed 2 or 3 months ago. The rest of us need to focus on what we can do here. Can someone tell me, why haven't we just had a vote of no confidence? You know, say however, make it as sweet as possible if you want. But have a vote of no confidence, and let's move on. For her to be involved in this selection process and the training of the next ethics officer, I think is embarrassing, atrocious, and a huge, huge mistake. So please, can we just have a vote of no confidence? Well, some of those folks who are sitting up here that in the last year that I've been here that no one's spoken, isn't it a problem when the ethics officer, is messing around with the help? However you want to say it. I mean, is there a book somewhere that says, yes, that's not unethical? That won't bring a negative impact on this board? I don't think you'll find that book. I think you have to get off dead center and make a decision that let's move forward in a positive way. And I thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Jackson. Ms. Baer, item 8.
Wow, he's tall.
Dr. Jackson, do we have an application from you in this stack of 25? Okay, just checking.
Several weeks ago, the City Commission met to hear from the Ethics Board about their recommendations for strengthening the Ethics Code. If you attended or watched, you saw what was described by the Tallahassee Democrat as Mayor Daley tears into the Independent Ethics Board. I agree. After reviewing the proposed ordinances and supporting documents, as well as reviewing the commission meeting in great detail over and over and over again, Citizens for Ethics Reform met with the mayor and all of the city commissioners to discern their intentions regarding the Ethics Board, because frankly, we were concerned. When speaking specifically with the mayor, we had a very lively debate over many of his proposals, and it seemed we were able to come to an agreement over crucial aspects of the proposed ordinances. We listened to his criticisms of the board and primarily the board's ethics officer. His initial complaint was regarding the handling of an anonymous complaint, which we've already talked about in great detail, about the Kraft brothers. Mayor Daley shared with us that Ms. Meadows-Keefe's investigation of the incident consisted of no more than her listening to Mr. Daley's explanation that he had no prior knowledge of the commercial and had not given, nor would he ever give, permission for the video's use in commercial. And Ms. Meadows-Keefe, in that instance, said, case closed. Now, we agree with Mayor Daley and the City Commission that proper protocol wasn't followed and that ideally any ethics officer should not be able to autonomously declare case closed, as apparently the ethics officer did in this instance. Unfortunately, this isn't the first time the ethics officer's conduct has been called into question. She has been riddled with controversy since she was first hired by the city. Ultimately, the Ethics Board decided to retain her rather than do a national search, which I've already referenced. We strongly criticize the board for this move. It has been almost a year since the city has learned that Ms. Meadows-Keefe has engaged in an inappropriate relationship with a city employee, an employee that falls under the jurisdiction of the Ethics Board. This is another clear conflict of interest, considering the independent ethics officer must be just that, completely independent from the commissioners and the city employees. The ethics officer should have notified the board of this Since she failed to inform the board, once this became public knowledge and not gossip among the city staff, the board should have demanded an explanation. The City of Jacksonville's ethics ordinance and bylaws has a separation clause for the ethics officer. This clause includes language regarding conduct unbecoming or detrimental to the performance of his or her position or the integrity of the Office of Ethics. Now we've learned that Ms. Meadows-Keefe has not followed the board's direction in announcing the opening for her position. This should have been announced at the 1st of September. Then it was said that it was going to be announced the day after our last board meeting. And our first announcement has occurred probably this last Sunday. This has put the board seriously behind, and this is a problem. Most recently, we learned of the ethics officer using board funds for personal memberships without the board's knowledge. We do appreciate the mayor's leadership in calling for a board audit given this information. When we asked the mayor and the commissioners to provide the board the responsibility and authority envisioned by the ethics charter, we can understand their reluctance given the board's inability to use its current weak authority. It's difficult for our coalition to be in this position to defend the board when it has failed its responsibilities to supervise the ethics office. To its credit, the board has prepared a recommended ethics ordinance that we fully support. You gave us a seat at the table in preparation of your recommendations, and we thank you for that. In our individual meetings with the mayor and the commissioner, we have urged them not to hold the actions of the ethics officer against the broader goal of a strong ethics ordinance. However, it is important that this ethics board address the lack of accountability that has become a concern of those who will approve these ethics ordinances. We are losing the public relations war for the ethics board due to the ethics officer and the board's refusal to deal with the ethics officer. Allowing her to dictate her own exit strategy is insufficient. The board needs to show the citizens of Tallahassee that it truly is a board of ethics and it holds its members and its ethics officer to the highest standard. The board needs to either have a public hearing on these charges or fire her now. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else on item 8? We are done with item 8. I want to jump now to, very quickly, to item 4. You have, find item 4, why do I not have it? I have a highlighted copy. One of the things we have in item 4D is, I think C and D, are the Leon County Code of Ethics and the Leon County Ordinance, Ethics Ordinance. This came up in the last City Commission meeting where they had a chance to talk about it. And so we thought we'd provide this as an information item as we move forward, just something for you to be aware of. This is what now they do not have an independent ethics board, but what a far broader ethics ordinance might look like. I know I have talked with the coalition folks about this, as well as some of the other items that other jurisdictions have done. So this is primarily an informational piece. And if I can find, I have 2 pages of notes. Where? No. I apologize. I am apparently discombobulated here. I was going to go to 4A and 4B. Not finding my notes. We're going to do that after our break so that I can find it. That would jump us back up to item 3. We have done A and B. That moves us to C, D, and E. And I'd like to start from the broader view on this and work down to the detail, which would probably put us on 3E first. 3E is the 5-year history So you can see what our expenses were in 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. These are, again, the city fiscal year beginning October 1, ending September 30. You can see what our budgets were, what our expenses were, and what our unused budget was. See that each year we have not used something in the neighborhood of 25 to 30% of our budget. On 3E, that's the long spreadsheet. Do we have any comments or questions?
Mr. Chair, I did meet with Ms. McNeil, as you requested, at the last meeting to go over the budget.
Okay. I had on about in the middle of the page, it's 521180. It's that row, unclassified contractual services. I see an expense. Every year the expense is in the $6,000 or $7,000 range, except 2017. It jumped up to $36,393.
And the explanation for that is that that was our time when we asked for additional money from the city commission. And I had notes on it, and then when we started to...
Okay, well, asking for additional money would be additional budget. This shows as an expense, a $36,400 expense.
Okay. These were encumbered expenses.
For what?
For legal in the amount of $29,825.
And why did it not show in the legal line right above that?
Because of how the legal services were paid for. A purchase order was used to pay, and then some of it was paid for via a P card.
We paid an attorney on a P card?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We have done that in the past. I think we've done that with our current board council.
Okay, so in the prior year, and if I look at 2016, if I look at those two lines, 2016 was about $60,000. 2017 would be about $65,000. In 2018, it drops to $20,000. Okay, could we maybe next month see some detail, like
Yes.
an actual purchase order or a P card receipt or something on those? Because I'm still
Okay.
befuddled a little bit by the size of.
And then we also had a court reporter we paid with those encumbered funds through a P card, and then also we had $5,680 for WCOT in that particular year.
Okay.
Isn't that when we had Jerry Currington and all them too? I think that's in that line item.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, contract.
So we ran out of funds, or we were getting close to running out of funds in the legal column. So we had other unclassified professional services where we drew money out, where we had the money available to pay for our legal expenses.
So that would be the $40,000 that shows in line 521040 under 2017?
I believe so.
Because that's the budget.
Yes.
So every year we have finished every year well substantially under budget.
And there have been times when, for example, we have over budgeted each time, in the campaign contribution refund program, and if we have had shortfalls in other parts of the budget, we have drawn out of that. But the lesson learned in 2016, 2017 was that we did have to approach the commission for a supplemental appropriation to finish the fiscal year, and it was this board's decision at that time to not ever be in that position again. So the board's been diligent to ask for funds, knowing that each year the board doesn't know what it's going to get in the way of complaints, which add to the cost of administering the board. So we are returning money each year to the commission. And I think part of the discussion that Ms. McNeil and I had, and that the board should talk about, since we've already entered fiscal year 20, is in future years, how do you want to adjust, if you want to adjust, your budget requests? So do you want to continue to ask for more than you think you need? Or do you want to ask for less, or do you want to reallocate allocations?
Well,
I think we need to reallocate. There's a lot of negatives that were taken from other categories that need to be adjusted, I would recommend.
Okay. When you look at 20, let's see, we're in 2020, fiscal year 2020 right now. So 2019, we reverted 30-some%, looks like. 2018, in almost 40%, I'm guessing here.
Right.
2017, 25% or thereabouts. I guess the question for the board is, well, there are two things. If we get expanded jurisdiction and we think we're going to see serious complaints where we're actually spending money on investigators and prosecutors, we will spend some big money in those on those complaints. If we continue to operate the way we are now, where there isn't much jurisdiction, so we're unlikely to get a complaint that falls within our jurisdiction, then we would continue to have that big surplus. So I guess it's a matter of, is this the time to talk about the surplus, or should we wait and see what our jurisdiction looks like? So, Mr. Payne.
It might be wise to wait there, but I would like to see more in our monthly budget reports, a true accounting for where something has been drawn from column A to put on column B, so that it's clear to us where we're getting the money for each month.
Okay. So let's then go to 3D, which is a monthly printout.
Right.
So what you're saying here is you'd like to, any time within a month that we move money from one item to another, there would maybe be another row that shows the amount reduced from that row to be added to another row with a comment, so we can see on a month-to-month basis where those adjustments are occurring moving forward.
Yes.
Okay.
That would be ideal for me.
Okay. I think we can. I see everybody nodding. We could accommodate that. I also, on the monthly, would like to see more. The last column says examples. I would like to see something that is more explicit than examples. So, for instance, line 523080 that says $1,500 in software. That doesn't mean much to me.
Broken out more.
Broken out more, and something more than examples, something that would cover, that we were assured covered at least, say, 80 or 90% of the expense. Because you could tell me you spent $1,000 and give me examples of how you spent $100, and those would be examples, but they're not fair examples because they don't account for the vast majority of spending.
Examples? You wanted it called something else?
I don't care what it's called.
Itemization.
Itemization, sure.
There you go.
Mr. Payne to the rescue.
See, if you see line item 521180, you were talking about unclassified contractual
Right.
services. It shows that the board consultants were in that line item.
Yep.
That's why we were over budget.
Okay.
And the WCOT, so, right.
Okay. And then I'm assuming these at the bottom that say City of Tallahassee overhead, those are just
Fixed.
their percentage, since the board employees are city employees, their percentage assignment that they would do to any unit of the city. I know we're not a unit of the city, but we don't calculate pay and withholding and
Nope.
all the other good things
The
for
city
you. So
does
the city
that
all that.
at the top, and then at the bottom with the 5600 series down there, that's the allocation that we get charged for HR, accounting, purchasing, environmental, and vehicle garage.
And I will note, the only one we've ever used was vehicle garage expense. None of the other expenses at that, on the 5,600 items, have ever been used since we've been on
Okay,
board.
but those are assigned to us by
Yes,
the city, so I
they
mean,
are.
the city gives us the money and then takes some back, so that's sort of up to them. Okay, so let's schedule for a future, once we have a better idea what our jurisdiction may or may not look like, probably after the end of the year, let's plan to come back on this and look at our annual surplus and have a serious discussion about what surplus we would need to plan for, if we need to plan for a surplus, if we had a serious ethics complaint, say, that involved the city official, what are the implications of us going back to the city to ask for the money to do the investigation on that complaint? I think that all bears some discussion, but probably not right now, if that's okay. Okay.
Does that mean a revision to the budget in the mid-year?
Well, we've got our 2020 approved budget.
So we'll just go forward with that until...
It's done. I guess if we said we didn't think we needed as much surplus, we could offer it to the city. I don't know that it's worth the accounting to them to take it back mid-year, or if we would just, we'd make that decision at that time. If we were sure we didn't need it, I guess we could offer it back mid-year. Or they could put it in some kind of reserve. Now, the other option would be, if we thought we needed a reserve, would be for us to not hold a reserve. We would get a budget that covered our monthly operations, and there was a reserve fund placed, like, for instance, in the state budget, the governor gets money, general revenue appropriated to him for certain emergencies. It's not a whole lot of money, but it's a substantial amount. And then he draws against that money if there are wildfires or whatever. So there could be an emergency fund for the board. It doesn't sit in the board's budget. It could be under the city manager, under the auditor, and we would go to them and say, we have these complaints, we need to hire investigators, and it would be sort of released under predetermined conditions. So there might be another way to handle a surplus rather than just have us roll back $100,000 plus each year. But that's probably a future. Any comments on those things? I don't have a card on those things. Then the most detailed item we have here is item 3C, and this is, I believe, Ms. Meadows-Keefe, these are all for you. The board approved a couple of years ago paying bar dues. We have not readdressed that, which is something we could do. I see compliance board certificate. I know the CCB, they offer healthcare certifications and ethics certifications. I assume that's an ethics certification?
Yes.
So, okay, so I'm told, yes, that is an ethics certification.
And the city customarily does pay bar dues, I think, in the city attorney's office. Granted, I'm not an attorney in practice here, but I do maintain a license, and I think that was actually a requirement of the job when I got it, so I must maintain it.
Okay, so that when we look at hiring and interviewing, if we have professionals of whatever ilk, whether they're attorneys or some other kind of professionals that have to maintain licensure, that's one of the things we need to make sure we specifically address in our interviews and hiring is compensation and whether or not we're going to be paying their annual or biennial license fees. I see Tallahassee Bar and Florida Bar. How are those different?
Okay, the Tallahassee bar, okay, well, the Florida bar is the bar number, like the card. So you're renewing your bar membership each year.
That's the base bar.
Yes, that's
amount.
the
Okay.
base bar,
Yes.
and I do belong to the administrative law section, so I think that's an extra $75 or $100 to belong to that section. So you get enhanced materials, you get discounts on CE, things of that nature. The Tallahassee Bar is a local bar association, that I join this year. I would not plan to rejoin that organization. There was a particular reason I joined, and I can't recall what that was. I think it was to potentially advertise for a board attorney. They do allow you, if you're a member, to place ads to advertise for vacancies. But I haven't really felt like I used this, and so that's something I would not seek to do again.
Okay, and then Council of Government Ethics Laws, that's Kogel?
Yes, ma'am.
And
Yes, sir.
I think
Yeah.
we have at least one assistant city attorney who's are you president
Deputy.
of Kogel?
She's
Or
president.
President of Kogel? Congratulations,
And she's
I guess.
deputy city attorney.
Excuse me, it's not assistant deputy city attorney. I doing poorly with titles tonight. And Ethics Board Local Patriotism.
Yes, that actually is the Village Square. I don't know if any of you have been to Village Square events, but that's actually extremely valuable, and you get a fair amount of interaction with leadership in Tallahassee, and particularly this year, they are focusing on what you see there, local patriotism. So the focus of presentations this year is on the value of local government. They're basically referencing disorder at the federal and state levels and saying that if you really want to make a difference, it's at the local government level. So this is an opportunity to see other citizens, and these are all citizens that are very engaged in the community that come to these events. I've seen members of the coalition there. I see many other folks attend. So I feel as if, and I get into good discussions with people there about the board. So people have asked me about that.
And then I think the two that have drawn the most comments since last month are the Tiger Bay membership, and I think everybody knows what Tiger Bay is.
No, with the exception of me.
With the
I'm not a native. I'm not a native.
Oh,
of
well,
Tallahassee, so exactly what is Tiger
Ms.
Bay?
Meadows Keefe, you can describe Tiger Bay.
Oh, well, it is an organization, and they actually have them all over the state in different locations, and it is considered political in nature. It does not endorse candidates. So it is not choosing one candidate over another. What it does is it basically brings leaders from around the state to talk about to talk about interesting issues. And you get folks like Roger Stone was one speaker. Board member Graham was a speaker. And
They hounded me until I showed up.
they hounded you?
Yes, they did.
Commissioner Ziffer is currently the president. So what it is, it's an opportunity to see all of the appointing authorities to this board. Usually they're all here, all there in one room. The main reason that I feel it's important is that in addition to ethics, this board is involved in campaign finance, at least marginally, with the campaign contribution refund program. So campaign finance has been an issue discussed, and also we have some dealings with the lobbying programs. So that is what that organization is about and why I feel it's valuable. I will say the first meeting I went to, I've been a member for probably 7 years. The first meeting I went to, the topic of discussion was this job. And it was a candidate forum with Commissioner Miller and Mr. Stewart. And the whole lunch was about what was going to happen and if there was going to be this board. So it's pertinent local issues and statewide issues.
Okay. Questions, comments? Mr. Payne.
My feeling in looking over this brings me kind of back to the mission statement of the Ethics Board. And we're not simply looking at actual integrity, but of perceived integrity. And it's obviously come to the attention of the public, certain areas of the public, that it may be questionable for the city or the ethics board through the city or the other way around, paying the fees for things like Tiger Bay. I have no doubt that it adds value to Ms. Meatherskeef's job. I think it might be wise, in the interest of perceived integrity, to follow the city's lead. And if the city, for instance, pays the Florida bar dues for their staff attorneys, then it's appropriate for us to do so. If they pay for the Tallahassee Bar Association, then that might be appropriate. But in my looking at, or basically asking friends who are public sector attorneys, it's not that common for the Tallahassee Bar Association fees to be paid. Things of that nature. I think it might be wise to at least inquire what the policy of the city is and to try to align ourselves with that.
And I'm happy to pay for that myself now, if that's caused an issue. I paid for it myself before, and I'm happy to do that again.
I have a couple motions I'd like to make, but I cannot make them while I'm in the chair and the vice chair is gone. Is there anybody who would be willing to volunteer to chair for a while?
I'll take it.
Mr. Ray?
Oh, okay. Volunteered.
Mr. Ray volunteers. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. My first motion is for Mr. Reed to draft a change to our bylaws to say that any travel expenses or membership expenses by any board staff, whether they are city employees or contract employees, have to be approved by the board.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next motion.
Mr. Chair, I have a second motion is that the board request the ethics officer to repay the amounts paid in membership fees for Tiger Bay for however many years they've been paid.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes.
And that would be the end of my motions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I transfer back.
Now it's transferred back to me. So, Ms. Meadows-Keefe, we have just made a request of you. With that, we would go to, I finally found my notes, item 4B, and Dr. Jackson is gone. On 4B, we are working through this is the current jurisdiction of the board. Remember, it falls in 4 areas: misuse, disclosure, voting abstention, and gifts. And what I was going to do was cover one of these each month. So this month we're talking about voting abstention. So you can see on the first page what the ethics ordinance says about voting abstention. Members of the mayor and members of the commission are required to abstain from voting on matters that would benefit them personally or cause them personal loss. They have to announce it at the meeting, complete an abstention form, and leave the meeting chambers during the discussion of the matter. This provision is very, very similar to the state law, which is laid out, the relevant portions are laid out on page 2. So I believe that we can be guided, if we ever have a complaint on this, by the case law, and I've included on page 1 a very brief synopsis of a U.S. 11th Circuit Court of Appeals opinion about the affirmative duty to vote that law imposes on local government, on government officials. Then on page 2, you can see the state law says no county or no municipal officer shall vote in official capacity in any measure which would inure to his or her private special gain or loss. So again, that very closely tracks the current city ordinance. Going to page 3, you can see there's more detail about providing notice that something might inure to their gain or loss. The state law goes a little farther, actually, than the ethics ordinance. Says they cannot participate in any matter without first disclosing the nature of their interest. And down at the bottom of page 3 in bold, you'll see the term participate means any attempt to influence the decision by oral or written communication, whether made by the officer or at the officer's direction. Again, farther than the ordinance, so you can't tell your staff to go talk to other city officials. That's out of Chapter 112. Then when you jump over to Chapter 286 on page 3, when you may abstain from voting, 286 is the voting requirements for folks like our city government. You may not abstain from voting unless you have a conflict, basically, under Chapter 112. And then the rest of that page and on to page 5 shows the primary provisions in Chapter 112. Then after that are a couple of more Florida cases on page 5 that talk about members voting, the requirement to vote, and that voting does not mean a roll call vote. If a vote is taken and the chair says, okay, I see everybody nodding their head, and it gets recorded in the minutes as all the members present voting yes, that meets the requirement to vote. So what we've been doing in terms of not taking a roll call on a lot of minor matters does fit within the case law. And then the last page is or page 6 and 7 actually, are a couple of recent Florida Commission on Ethics advisory opinions on the issue of required voting, which again, I think these opinions would provide guidance to us because the ordinance and the state law are pretty similar. And then you see as the last page of this attachment, or actually I guess it's on the agenda as item 4A, is the form that the State Commission on Ethics provides for voting conflicts. This tells you who has to fill it out and when you have to fill out and what you have to disclose, and has the appropriate blanks on the back on the second page of the form. So that in whatever 3 minutes is a rabbit run through voting conflicts. So that again is of our 4 major things that fall within our jurisdiction: misuse, disclosure, voting, abstention, and gifts. We've covered misuse. This is voting, abstention. In the next 2 months, we'll do disclosure and gifts, so that we'll all have the background on what's in our jurisdiction today. If our jurisdiction gets expanded, I hope that we will do something similar so that we can see the related laws, the case law, and the Ethics Commission opinions that would guide us, so that when we do get an ethics complaint and pursue it, that we're able to move from a well-educated viewpoint. So I would commend that to your reading. With that, I think we are in a position where we are going to take our break. Let's come back at 6:40.
Yeah.
Yeah, so unless you want to just keep rolling.
Want to keep rolling?
Yeah. All right.
Can I ask, could I please be excused briefly to
Yes,
go to the restroom?
yes. No, you don't have to ever ask, just
No, I just didn't want to
Just
disrupt
just
the
get up
meeting,
just get up
but
and wave.
I'm sorry.
That's the second time you've announced that on TV, too.
Well, I think the television world wants to know.
Okay, so let's go back up and on item 3, F and G. I told you I would jump around, and I am
You
doing it.
are keeping me on my toes, for sure.
On items F and G. Item F, again, is all of the public record requests received by the city over the last month. And they do a wonderful job for us
They do.
of compiling this and also redacting the information that should not be made public. And again, thank you to the city for that. And then 3G is the subset of those issues that they've identified as bigger policy issues. So the 3F, that list, the comprehensive list, will be a lot of little things like, what are the utility bills at this address for the last 2 years, because I'm thinking about buying my house or whatever, and I want to know whether the disclosures about the utility usage have been fair, that kind of thing. The shorter list is typically the ones that are bigger, and you'll see that there were 2 this month that relate to the live PD television show. And if you don't know what that is, I'd had to Google it. I do not. The live PD show is a look at police departments. Let's see. Live PD gives viewers a look at policing in America in real time, focusing live cameras on officers on the night shift from agencies around the country. The Wakulla County Sheriff's Office was featured in the show's 2nd edition. So TPD is coming up, or maybe it's already been aired.
It's been on.
I guess.
Yep.
And what I learned in looking at this was that they were very careful. We have Marcy's Law that the voters just amended into our Constitution. The legislature's still dealing with Marcy's Law stuff. The legislature was very careful, TPD was very careful to not identify victims. They made part of that a part of their show. So that was an issue that came up, and everything I've read says the Tallahassee Police Department handled it with aplomb, handled it as ethically as you could handle it. And the second one relates to an easement related to the East Side parking garage. So are there any issues on either list that anybody feels need a follow-up? Seeing none. That would complete item 3 and move us to item 9, social. Well, let's wait till Ms. Graham gets back.
He's here.
I had Mr. Sims.
Did he leave?
Is not here, and Dr. Jackson is not here, so I guess I'm not taking those cards. Ms. Graham, we are on item 9 on the social media, and we've talked about whether we want to be visible on social media concerning, like a Facebook or Twitter, announcing things that the Ethics Board is doing. We've had some discussion about the difficulty of controlling comments and whether or not we have enough substance to push out on any kind of a regular basis. My impression is that's been kind of dying on the vine, that discussion, or are we still in a position where we want to pursue that?
I think what's been instructive for me is understanding the restraints that we need to operate under. I do think in today's world, many people gain their information through social media. And therefore, even if we had a very limited presence that would put forward meeting dates, subject matter, that kind of thing, I think that would improve our visibility within the community and what we're doing, because how else are they gaining information about what the Independent Ethics Board is doing? I know we put out on our web page or the city page, but really that's not how most people get information.
Is it possible for us to, the city has I think a Twitter account? Or would it be possible for us to post stuff through the city's existing account without creating our own?
Can I
Please.
talk about that, please?
Ms. Meadows?
Okay. The Twitter platform is not so desirable in that people can @ you. So that means if we're announcing a board meeting on the TalGov Twitter, someone could potentially post a negative comment or some kind of complaint, and you'd be added and identified. So I think the discussion from the last board meeting was that the Ethics Board could have, and after researching it, a fan page. A fan page doesn't mean you're a fan necessarily, but it does not allow comments.
So
Or you can turn off comments, and I would suggest that you give approval that what would be posted would only be meeting dates and times. If there's a commission meeting or a workshop, it's basically vanilla information that just gives people raw facts and doesn't give any kind of substantive discussion of anything. It just gives them the information they need and doesn't require you to deal with comments.
But if someone went to Facebook and searched for the Tallahassee
They would find it.
Independent Ethics Board, they would find that page.
They would.
And be able to, okay.
But
And then-
there would be no, so we would be pushing information out, but not accepting
Right.
any comments. So if people want to make comments, they can either call staff, call a board member, or if they've got a hotline issue or something where they want to make a
Right.
sworn
We can
complaint.
put all our
they do that.
digits on there.
And we can
So
put
we could put
information.
all our contact information, so we could do ethics@talgov.com, we could give the hotline number out.
Yep.
We could give a lot of information.
Okay, Mr. Payne.
One concern I have with any leaning towards social media is I'd be concerned about any leaning toward exclusivity on social media, meaning that anything that is posted on social media which requires people to have certain accounts, it needs to also be available on the public website.
It is. It's on TalGov, and we have our own page on TalGov that has all of that
Yes,
information.
I know it is now. I just
Right.
don't want any approach to that, because a lot of people are doing that. They're saying, why do I need a website when I've got my Facebook page?
Okay, so there would be nothing on this page that was not also available on the TalGov website. Is that what you're saying, Mr. Payne?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I like
So that
that.
I can see it, because I
You know, on Facebook?
once had a Facebook account many years ago. It's been inactive for years.
I have 3. You want one of mine?
Sure. But I'm although I'm probably the only former IT professional that's a total Luddite, I don't get involved in social media, and I think I'm not
Smart.
unique in that. So
Okay, so is that where the board would like to go? Is that the?
I think that's a good,
And at
Okay,
one
so
point
Ms.
it'd be-
Graham moves
I
that
move.
we do that stuff.
that we do a fan page that will put information about the Tallahassee Independent Ethics Board out for those who access their information through social media. And we maintain the same information on the
TalGov.
TalGov site.
Second.
Okay, and Mr. Ray seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Hold on, someone in the audience is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you have a comment? Please. I'm sorry, I didn't look up.
No, I was just worried about raising my hand.
Oh, no, just walk up to the
In
mic.
terms of making this social...
But please identify yourself.
Mr. Perez, that's fine.
Okay, and you're from Tallahassee?
Yeah, well, I come from Miami. I'm
Okay.
doing a research paper on this.
On what?
On just attending council hall meetings.
Oh,
Oh,
welcome.
you emailed me.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
emailed
okay.
you. Yeah, just because I didn't know
Welcome.
if this was by appointment.
Will you
or-
send us a copy when you're done?
Yeah, I can try if it's good enough. I don't know. But
I'm sure it'd be
in terms of the social media, because you guys already passed on it, how does that affect the budget? Because is there someone who's going to regulate the page, someone who's going to be in charge of the page, or is it going to be the same person who runs the TalGov website, who runs the specific website for the Independent Ethics Board?
Mr. Chair, can I answer?
Please, Ms. Meadows-Keefe.
All right, because I haven't seen you on Facebook.
And you will not.
I will not. I would propose that, I already have the page set up. It's just dormant at this stage because I haven't had the approval to set it up. So I would do it. And I've been given the boundaries, so there will be nothing sensational on it. So there would be no cost to that. You do, however, and I should remind the board members about this because we did talk about it last month, but they do have to be archived. And it's this company called S. Marsh, which basically they sweep through your social media if you're a government organization every now and again and sort of glean the information and dump it somewhere in the cloud. So you're not relying on Facebook or other media sites to keep your information safe. So that's the only additional cost would be that, and we would add to the city's contract. And I want to say I talked to you all about that last month, and it was like $28 a month. It's negligible, but that way the material is kept.
So the city already has a contract. Can we piggyback the
We
contract?
glom
without
onto that contract.
And we can do that without going
Yes.
through a procurement process?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I know it's a concern that most people overlook with companies and whatnot once they start a social media page. So I just wanted to make sure it was of interest.
That's a great
Thank you.
comment. I'm glad you brought it up. Thank you, sir.
Good luck on your paper.
I have a few of those due myself. We are, I think item 10 is a follow-up from last month. Everybody's had a chance to read. That's our board attorney's look at closed citizen complaints. That interestingly, if we get an inspector general, those complaints I suspect, will go to the inspector general and will get a little more purchase than they do in ethics world. Anything that any member wants on a future agenda? I can tell you, or I'll tell the people in the audience, I know we committed long ago to do more on lobbying, and it is coming. If we don't get it while I'm chair, whoever's the next chair will get an epistle from me about something to put on the agenda concerning some. I know there have been concerns about people lobbying the city, and can you tell who they're talking to, and have they appropriately registered and all of that, and I think there are ways to solve those problems. But I know that is an issue that we promised you months ago, and it's kind of hanging fire, and it is not forgotten. Any public comment on non-agenda items? Anything you guys would like to see on a future agenda? It is quiet. Oh, okay, our next meeting, any other comments? No other comments. Our next meeting is Tuesday, November 19th. I'm sorry. Our next monthly meeting is Tuesday, November 19th, 2019, from 4 to 7. At the moment, we're planning it in this room. That is subject to change based on our next meeting, which will happen sometime between October 25th and the November 19th meeting. It will be in one of the smaller rooms, and we will sit down as a group, go through the 50 or however many applications we have, make sure that we all have some that we're satisfied with, narrow the list, and decide how we are going to proceed. And that may affect some of what that November 19th meeting looks like. So if there's nothing else for the good of the order, we are adjourned.